Okay, doke. We're live. This is Deeper Than Dogma, episode 24 after show. We're just starting it up, so y'all feel free to bring up the main topic, I guess, of the actual hangout.
Well, I mean, first off, I mean, Frank's. I know Carbon was watching. I saw him in the external chat there. Frank and Seko, did you guys see the show at all?
Actually, no, I just got home.
Oh,
I just missed it, I guess.
that's awesome. No, just checking in. Dragnot was watching. At least the last part I saw him in the comment section as well. Drake, how did you like the show?
Uh, you always start it when I'm at work, so I catch like the last 30 minutes of it. I enjoyed the fact that you all just had the audacity to have the conversation because many consider it just taboo to even talk about the evil MRAs because you didn't just listen to propaganda. So kudos for you.
That was our channel will be flagged and gone tomorrow. So
Oh yeah, just like mine. I got yeah, my strike is for 6 months, so no hangouts, boohoo.
You got a strike on your account?
Yeah, I criticized Matt Slick a little too much, a little too harshly rather. So
Oh,
Yeah.
so you've dealt with the wonderful Slick as well, huh?
oh yeah, I got my pee-pee slapped and yeah. So oh well.
So one of the things that I just kind of off the kind of on the topic of the whole MRA and feminism type of thing. We're talking about these. Oh, sorry, cars going by here. Um, it seems to be like at the extremes ends of either movement there is this huge animosity towards each other. And it's like this and it spills over onto social networks all the time. But the most recent one that I've been kind of reading about recently in Ontario here is with the case of Greg Elliott.
That's
Uh,
right.
yeah, you're familiar with that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I actually thought it was the subject of the first show. And I was quite surprised to learn that it was a debate of whether the men's rights movement was important or not.
Yeah. My apologies. We try to phrase it in a way just like to ask a question about it. I mean that's why we put in the title that way.
Sure.
Um,
It's clickbait.
yeah. I think it's a it's one thing to just be like, okay, hey Francis, what do you do, type thing, and more into to put them on that position where it's just like, hey Francis,
Why do you hate women?
why do you do this, like, and I think that
Right.
the responses are a little bit different from that, and it's not supposed to be like put people like on the hot seat, but it's it really is a good way to explore the person's view of what they actually have.
By the way, if I may, somebody made a point that I think is worth addressing. Even the dumbest arguments sometimes need to be addressed, and not that this is a dumb question, but one of the most common questions is why do the MRAs and feminists seem to hate each other? And I would actually like to answer that. Um, One, understand that MRAs or just people in the men's movement in general tend to respond negatively to ideological feminists is because the negativity that ideological feminists promote about men in general. The fact is, we men, believe it or not, have feelings. And so when we hear all day long that we're rapists, that we're predators, and here's this made-up stat, and 6 out of 3 women are going to be raped every 12 seconds. Therefore, all men are predators, all men are rapists. You have privilege, patriarchy. You've been keeping us down for 1,000,001 years. When you get bombarded with this massive shame sandwich day in and day out, after a while men go, it's just another feminist nutcase.
Well,
When you
I think that the thing is with this is that I think that the men's right movement and the feminist movement should be independent from each other.
they
I
are.
mean, well, I mean that's what I mean is that at their core, the moderates, the feminists have their issues they want to address. The men's rights have their issues that need to be addressed. What happens on the extreme spectrums is the extreme feminists put themselves directly in the path of the goals of the men's right activists, and on the extreme side for the men's right activists, they put themselves directly in front of the goals for the feminists. So at its core, both movements and just the fundamentals of what they want should be completely independent of each other. You should be able to talk about men's rights and the feminist movement without actually having to have counterpoints on either of them. They should be independent of each other completely. But it's the extreme spectrums that put them in conflict with each other, when really, they should be completely separate and could be and should be addressed separately.
You know how I think about this is the men's rights movement. If you're to say that they have a unified goal, it would boil down to impartiality under law and dignity in culture. I liken it to climbing the mountain. Now, as we climb the mountain, there are men's rights activists out there who go hunting the feminist beast. And there are those of us who don't deal with the feminist beast unless it attacks us, because we're busy trying to get to the top of the mountain. A lot of people, and this is a very human thing, that they tend to dichotomize. They tend to come from a mindset of duality, where it is one or the other. My experience is that this is people who are new to the movement, this is people who are young, this is people who are hurt. Those of us who've kind of moved beyond the hurt, those of us who've worked beyond all the BS arguments and who understand where they're coming from, tend to go, yeah. The problem is that you have such a media presence where people start asking, well, you're an MRA, why do you hate women? Well, when you're just living your daily life, you can ignore these. But when these questions come to you while you're sitting on a panel in front of a live audience on television, you have to address these sort of things.
So why do you think people would have that impression that just all you do, all your organization exists to do is to thwart women?
Well, first of all, the men's rights movement is not an organization. There are many organizations, most of which you've never heard of, who've been operating for years and years and years in the men's movement. People mistake the men's movement for AVFM because AVFM is loud, willfully and knowingly and tactically obnoxious. They try to be obnoxious. They go out of their way to piss people off. Their saying is, well, if you won't listen to our issues, you'll listen to our anger. So the problem is that people conflate the men's movement for one of the loudest bullhorns. But what they're not paying attention. AVFM, I think, is comprised of at most a dozen people. I'm not. I don't belong to AVFM. I interact with some of the members. I don't. I have played with them, but I'm not of them. They do bring a lot of value, but if I belong to any group, which I don't, I paid the Canadian Association for Equality a certain price because what they wanted to do is they wanted to open up Canada's first men's shelter, which they have. That was kind of my way of justifying that. But I think I just went on a tangent, and I can't remember where we started.
Well, the question was, why do you hate women? I'm just kidding. No, it's just basically just trying to see, because most of the stuff that I've seen is, and I know it's propaganda. I know a lot of it has to do with many people in the feminist movement, people who call themselves feminists, who may or may not be extreme radical feminists, or who may be genuinely interested in equality for women, have an impression of the dreaded MRAs who are only out there to thwart the efforts of women or womankind. So just from my understanding, for everyone else, how do you differentiate yourself? Because many people aren't familiar with many of these acronyms.
Can you? How do I differentiate myself? Can you rephrase that a little bit?
Yeah. So when we say MRA, MRM, and you
Right.
used another one, another acronym, I can't remember.
What was it?
AV something.
AVFM. Okay. Let us start off. Let us draw an org chart in our mind. Okay. Um, what we have is the men's movement. The men's movement is men all over the world paying attention to our legal and our cultural surroundings. Okay, they may be organized, they may not. Generally, you know, it could be just a husband talking to his neighbor, or it could be an organized organization. One one organization is called AVFM, A Voice for Men, and they are a Texas-based organization that does activism and that advocates for men. Their strategy for doing so is to walk into a party and start shouting through a bullhorn, and start shouting stuff that will rile people up as a means of getting attention. So what a lot of people think when they hear men's movement, they think of the loudest speaker. But the men's movement itself is divided into almost as many groups as there are people. Some of the notable ones would be the men's rights activists. Technically, these are people who agitate and who get involved in law for men's rights, for the legal conditions that men are dealing with. There would be another growing faction under the men's movement known as MGTOW, M-G-T-O-W, men going their own way. Again, these are men who are responding to the environment, but their response, instead of becoming activists and getting all involved in the legal system, trying to change things, is to withdraw. MGTOW points to the phenomena that more and more men are not getting married, more and more men are choosing not to engage in long-term relationships. The notion behind it is that marriage and long-term relationships and children is such a vector for a state attack against a man's well-being, his property, his freedom, that since these are vectors, they choose to avoid that which can draw the attention of the machine or create a condition which could involve the machine. And the legal system is a machine that grinds people up. So it is a self-protective stance, and it is a stance where they say, do you know what? I'm mostly giving up on women, mainly because I choose to live my life on my terms, and I want to do it this way. One might also, I don't, but because it deals with men, I'll also talk about pickup artists. Pickup artists are essentially young men who are trying to figure out how they can enjoy their sexuality, how they can get women into bed, how they can, what are the tactics, the methods, based on evolutionary biology. What does it take to be successful at getting women in bed? I don't really, they do not classify themselves as activists. They do not classify themselves as MGTOW, and most of the men's movement recognize this as a younger man's issue, and you know, it's like they are focused on women, whereas the men's movement in general is focused on men. Somebody had a question.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Frank. You were first.
Muted. Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Francis, I was curious, do you see the men's rights movement as a reactionary movement, responding to feminism or changes in law over the past generation or so?
Reactionary and responsive are two different things. I see the men's movement as a response to the legal environment and to the cultural environment. Reactionary implies that that there's something irrational about it. I would not say the men's movement in general is irrational. even though like any group, it's got its share of irrational people. Name a single human group that doesn't have them. So
Yeah, but
responsive,
90% of the
yes.
time they get blamed for stuff that isn't anything to do with them, like Return of the Kings or Elliot Rodger or other things like that, and nothing involved whatsoever.
I'm sorry, can you start your sentence again?
Oh yeah, no, I was saying half the time though they generally get blamed for the men's movement generally gets blamed for stuff that isn't done by MRAs. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can quite easily, either by cherry picking or just by looking at certain things that he's written, see that Paul Elam can say things that makes him sound like a cunt, because that's his whole idea for AVFM. He's the one that champions this idea of getting a bit in everybody's face, in order to, get your point heard by, basically being a twat while you're doing it. And it's some of the reasons why I disagree with Paul Elam. He's kind of making it very, very easy to attack the men's rights movement. Yeah,
and there's bleed over.
Yeah, and so yeah, that's one of the things. But even the manosphere does contain some sort of some wings of feminism, because you've got people like Camille Paglia and Erin Prizzi. They're basically the anti-Gloria Steinems of feminism, who are
Erin Pizzi is not feminist, by the way.
Pardon?
By the way, Erin Pizzi is not a feminist.
She was
back in the day, yes, but now very definitely not. But please continue.
Yeah, and Camille Paglia and some of the others that are coming out, and they're defending men, and I think it's good. I mean, I don't know what it is and why this sort of like newer wave of feminism and stuff just really wants to continue this narrative of men's rights as just a knee-jerk reaction to feminism. They don't want to share their pedestal. Whenever you get into an argument with a feminist, when you're trying to correct them about misinterpretations or things they're trying to assign to the men's rights that has nothing to do with it, and they don't seem to understand. FGM is illegal in Britain and America.
Female genital mutilation.
Yeah, there are still people who think that there is a debate that needs to be had about whether or not circumcision should be allowed to be the same. There shouldn't be a debate. It should just be the same. You shouldn't be allowed to, for religious or even aesthetical reasons. It's like, we're completely way behind them on body autonomy issues, and that's what the men's rights is about. It's not about pickup artistry, and it's not about hating women and hating feminism. It's about going, look, if this is all the stuff that women are allowed, and feminism says it's okay, you can look at all of this stuff where men are being treated as the same, if not worse. And, these feminists seem to be massive hypocrites when it comes to this.
Actually, regarding pickup artists, there is a specific group that is no longer as active as they were last year, I believe, called Manhood Academy.
I've pwned the professor plenty of times. He's just a twat.
The PUAs tend to be mostly, I would assume, associated with that group more than anything.
No, they're just the
pickup artist. Yeah, that's like the craziest wing of the pickup artistry sort of thing. But it's all people like that, Julian Blanc and other people. And I think the thing with the PUAs is they're nothing like men's rights activists. Men rights activists are seeing that there are some, problems and some insecurities with men and boys in our society. And pickup artists are too, except rather than helping, they're trying to make a buck out of it.
Yeah, I agree to that. Can you give me, since this is an after show, I'm going to take a liberty. Can you guys continue on, and I'll be back in a minute and a half?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Thanks.
Down with the patriarchy.
Oh, that patriarchy. There's certain narratives that come out of. This is one of the things I brought up in the show is that, and maybe, Chaz or somebody will disagree with me, but what I was saying earlier is that I don't think that the men's right movement or the feminist movement need to be in opposition with each other. I think that the extreme ends of it are the ones that put themselves in opposition with each other.
Well, no, you see, there's been lots of things where feminism has decided, feminists throughout the ages have decided to go against men's rights for no reason. There are even groups where people who are in no way call themselves men's rights activists, think of themselves more as a sort of like a feminist, have tried opening up men's rights groups in colleges in the UK, and they've been told they can't, yeah, because there's already a group dealing with social issues called the Feminist Society in these universities, and so they don't get a group just for men to talk about their own issues where women get given that, and so that's why you're finding a lot of the men's rights are opposing feminism, is because feminism is directly opposing and attacking them.
There should
Feminism
be
through the first punch.
There should be a men's group on every campus, like in the same way that there's a women's group.
Oh yeah, but this is the thing. Feminism comes out and then goes, men don't need their don't need a space because society is their safe space.
Well,
Women need a safe space from the rest of society because of men.
I have my own issues regarding safe spaces. I don't know if well, Frank, you can go if you.
I don't think I don't think that makes it like I don't think that objection really makes any sense because like in the broader society, I think how they're talking about a safe space, like already existing in the broader society, is not the kind of a safe space that a men's group or a women's group in your college or community. It's different when it's on a college campus, I think. I mean, the reason why these kinds of safe spaces over either sex are important on a college campus is because it's young people who are in a different social world. They are growing and dealing with pressures and stress and what have you, and I think that it makes a lot of sense to have a safe space for either sex, and to grant that to one and not the other seems fundamentally unfair.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. There is lots of stuff that does actually go. I mean, you see all of these videos by Anita Sarkeesian and by Rebecca Watson and all of these other trifling, passive-aggressive thundercunts that, try and state all of these problems that women have. And then if you turn around and did the same with men, you'd find just the same, if not more. Things like men, there are actual policies by companies against men, specifically because they're men, that they cannot sit next to an unsupervised child on an airplane. Yeah, because just by being a man, they must be a paedophile. Even though women have more access to children in our culture and therefore have more opportunity and do then subsequently abuse children more than men do. But you don't see that getting brought up by feminism. You don't see feminists talking about how we still cut little babies' winkies, but we don't do the same to women because, no, that's bad. And it's still going on about how it still happens in the world to women, yet in nowhere near the scale it happens to men in the world. Or how about we go down the batshit mental route of like where men were still being made to required to be in selective services and stuff like that, and how if we had a big enough war that required conscription, do you really think they'd be making women fight on the front lines? I fucking doubt it.
Right.
Well, actually, they would make them go into factories and work.
Actually, I'd like to point something out, is that the selective service issue is primarily an American issue. And the thing with selective service is if you do not sign up, there is a whole plethora of almost necessary governmental advantages that you're allowed to have, and such as getting a driver's license. My understanding is that you cannot get a driver's license in the United States, and if you're male, if you've not signed up for selective service. The second thing I want to say to that is that there are many countries who do make their women fight. Israel is a clear example.
Yeah, Israel's a great example.
Right, about selective service, you can't receive financial aid in colleges either without signing up for selective service.
Yeah, I think you can possibly get a driver's license, but in order to receive a license, you have to answer on a legal document if you have registered or not, and if you haven't, there is going to be a record of that, like, and the government is going to know. So.
I mean, and if you look with the way that advertising treats people as well, you always hear these things about how things negatively impact women in our media. You never hear any of the possible negative impacts towards men. And if you try ever bringing up the things that harm men in a conversation with a feminist, you are then bad for having mentioned that this happens to men too.
Well, one of the reasons why, I know I'm going slightly back in the conversation. One of the reasons why feminists attack men's rights activists is because feminism starts off with the presupposition that there is a class conflict between men and women, that men oppress women. This is the basis of the political ideology of feminism. Now, one of the things that men's rights activists who are tired of being, forgive the language, but shat upon in media, in popular culture, is that we are deliberately contraindicating that message. We are in direct opposition to the message that it is one oppressor class versus another, and we tear apart all the crazy in political feminism. And the problem is that without women being a clear victim, they cannot grow their user base, for lack of a better word. It would diminish their ability to, the strength of their message in media. It would diminish the strength of the message when approaching governmental organizations or in collecting funds from corporations or from charities. So the less of a victim that you make them, and the more that you show that they're not the only ones who have a rough edge, you're cutting into their funds, into their prestige, into their sense of self, into their investment, and this is why they go after us deliberately. Also, when somebody puts out a particularly egregious message, a stupid YouTube video, one MRA will hear about it, he'll share it, he'll put his 2 cents in, and suddenly, what they call piling on, suddenly you'll get a lot of men going, no. This message is incorrect. Here are the facts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, this opinion, I disagree with this opinion because you haven't considered X, Y, Z. And so when we combat a negative message about men, we are reducing the level of victims. Now, what is the one thing we presuppose about a victim? They have no choice. Therefore, if they have no choice, they are morally non-culpable. It's all self-defense, and anything goes in self-defense, right? So this is why you see some of the struggles between men's rights activists and feminists.
Well, it's one of the things that I've noticed in a lot of these things is that things that you might put out as a men's right issue is a men's right issue only because it's really a feminist issue. And I mean, one of the things you brought up there, for example, like the draft.
Yes.
Like the draft is an example there where it's like, hey, look, men are the only people that would be, that get picked for the draft. This is a men's issue here, and then it gets turned around and be like, well, no. What that is because of the culture thinking that women aren't good enough for that job,
right.
And therefore it's not that men are being treated unfairly. It's actually women that are being treated unfairly in this situation because they're considered not strong enough to serve in the forces or whatever. Another good example of this was there was a video out there a couple years ago from, I think it was put out in the UK somewhere, where it, I think everybody saw it. They had a man and a woman walking through a park, and the man was, kind of yelling at the female, and
Oh, yeah.
we've all kind of seen that one, I think, and when the man was yelling at the female, they're kind of panning around and hitting camera, showing other people's reactions, and like people are just shocked at this. People stood up, they intervened.
They fought. They beat him up.
They physically separated him from her, but yet the same couple walks to the park a couple hours later, and with the woman, not just yelling at the man, but she was physically assaulting him. She was pushing him around. She was doing exactly the same thing, well, if not just a little bit worse. And they're showing this, like, listen, and they're showing the camera, and people are laughing, like, oh man, look at that guy getting his ass kicked, whatever. The point was to illustrate that, there is this completely different attitude towards the way that we view abuse when it's a woman on a man. But that wasn't the message that the feminists saw. They saw this as like, oh, hey, look, this is the patriarchy. This is what we're talking about. Is that they don't view this woman enough as a threat to even intervene.
Well, this is the thing we do, right? The feminists don't get this. Is that they always talk about abuse, and it always seems to sound like every man's an abuser. And but you actually look at things. All boys are taught you can't hit girls. Yeah. Girls aren't taught you can't hit boys.
That's right.
Because they will hit you back. Like my cousin, she had 2 older brothers. Yeah, and if she was told, if you fight with your older brothers, and you get hurt, don't come crying to me because it was your fault for fighting with them, And there's this thing at the moment where this football player might be facing this American football player in this college might be facing criminal charges for punching a girl in the face, Now the instigation happened in a crowded club. They were both going for the bar. There was very small space to get to the bar where they were buying drinks. They accidentally bump into one another. She turns around and yells something at him. She then turns around and raises her fist up to him. He grabs her by the hand she's raised up in order to try and stop her from hitting him. She then knees him in the balls and punches him in the face, and he turns around and he wallops her one, and he's now the one that's in trouble.
That's right.
Though it was her who instigated the violence, who took that up to that level. She should be the one.
That is the issue of impartiality. Now, what we've been talking about in culture also holds true in the legal system. As I was saying earlier in the previous episode, men are stopped more than women. Men are arrested more than women. Men are charged more and for worse things than women. When they do go to court, they get to trial more often than women. When they're sentenced harder and longer than women for the same crimes, and when they are sentences, the sentences are significantly longer, something like 60%. A good rule of thumb is 60% on this, even though I can't give you the exact stats. So this cultural thing that we have also implies in law. So the fundamental issue behind the men's movement is impartiality under law and dignity, no bias in culture either.
And I think it's supposed to be pointed out that even if it wasn't 60%, if it was 5%, if it was 5%, if it was 1%, that's a problem.
But it's never spun that way, because we don't have control of the media. And as I was saying earlier, I don't know if it is women who are good at spinning messages or if it is some particular training in the feminist process of what is essentially doublethink. One of the things that you'll find very common in the feminist way of looking at things is there are 2 traits. One, they will slice off half the world. All the focus is on women and their victimization, while avoiding talking about women's advantages in any way possible. And if they do have to talk about men, they talk about men's advantages, but ignore the disadvantages. And men have said, well, no, it's balanced. We've both got advantages, we've both got disadvantages. And this is another one of the things that raise their ire. In order to keep that sense of we are special, we are victimized, we are the oppressed class, they must consistently harp on victimization, victimization, 1 in 3, 1 in 10, 80%, and they use numbers that sound just terrifying until, you know, when they say, or if they do mention men, it's like 1 in 3 women are going to be raped. But 1 in 70, I mean, 1 in 70, that's nothing. Well, divide your population by 70, and then, you know, half that to get the male population. You know, when you look at the real statistics, one of the things that the CDC did is when they did a survey on rape, it turned out it was something like 12,500,000 women are raped. And rape, and when they did the measurement for men, it was 12,500,000 plus some change. It was exactly the same number plus a little bit, but it wasn't called rape. It was called forced to penetrate. And because the laws of the United States, the FBI, the FBI does not define rape that way. Rape is being penetrated by anything, and men have penises. Men are normally the penetrators. What they also don't tell you is that that the feminists actively worked to make that definition hold true for the FBI. So you have, well, no, the FBI doesn't say this, so half of the population who are experiencing exactly the same thing, they're not raped. And, oh, by the way, we predefined rape so that it cannot include men.
Do you know what else I like? That study which used a very broad definition of abuse, but one most feminists would agree with, that involve things like coercion and sort of like psychological and, you know, emotional abuse and stuff, that women were more guilty than men of certain types of abuse, and that in lesbian couples there was a lot more abuse per capita than in any other type of couple.
I
Go ahead,
actually
Frank.
have I've had a thought now that we're on the topic of abuse. Is I know that there are certain mental health issues that affect men, but there is not a it's not as out there in the open, you know, in the media, and talking about mental health issues amongst men is not it's not very well accepted or received, and I wonder if there's anything inside, like, of the movement, as it were, to kind of promote more awareness around that.
Well, there is. They do keep raising how in the UK the leading cause of death for young males is suicide, and there are charities within the men's movement which are trying to raise awareness of this, provide shelters. There's recently been a news story where, because obviously this frightening statistic was out there, the Mayor of London gave funding to this company, Survivor UK, who help male victims of rape and abuse. They've had their funding cut to nothing. I mean, in the UK, we have, you know, study after study in government figures of arrests records, and, you know, it shows that men are 40% of the victims, yet there are 76 shelters for men in the UK. There are 6,700 for women. And that just goes to show the frightening disparity that goes on. And there is a problem with men's health when it comes to mental issues. And unfortunately, mental health as itself is a very, very hard thing to talk about. Stigma. If you're not a victim of it, you can't really understand it, which is why there is a lot of a sort of stigma around it. And plus, it's not all that long ago in history that there were some very barbaric things done in the name of medical science to people with mental health issues, which had no real medical benefit whatsoever. And I think that breeds a lot of stigma. We think of mental illness and we think of these psycho killers and sociopaths and You know, we think
Yeah,
of dangerous
I think,
people.
like, just in my lifetime, I've noticed a major change in the stigma, and I think there is less of a stigma
There
today
is.
than just 10 or 15 years ago. But I think that the polling data or the um, survey data or what have you, uh, uh, mental health issues affect men and women, and certain ones will affect more women than men, but 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 more women will go and seek treatment than men. And I think that's a thing that um, may take a sea change in order to create momentum to deal
Well,
with.
this is in fact one of the. This harkens a little bit to the social roles that men and women play. Now, people talk about social roles as though they're carved in stone. Some of them, I think, are instinct-based. Some of them are just the practicalities of the time. Some of them are just cultural assumptions. One of the assumptions is that a man who is weak is lesser, is unworthy. Now, where women generally place their value on their body, on their appearance. This is why men go after. This is why men and women get together. It's for our bodies, but there's a special. Women have a special. I don't know what to call it. A special place, a special grace, where we care more, generally speaking, about women. And if a man takes care of his own body, it's considered to be womanish, and it detracts from his. He is shamed for. It attacks a man's sense of honor, of value. We are valued for what we can do. And if we show ourselves to be ill, if we show ourselves to be mentally ill, if we show ourselves to be weak in any way, we are rejected by women because women like strong men. And this is just a guy thing, and it's not intelligent at all, but we all do this. We don't want to look weak, whether it's by instinct or socialization or culture. Going to the doctor. You'll notice men don't have a problem going to the dentist. Everyone goes to the dentist. But going to the doctor shows that you're physically weak. Therefore, as a man, you are somehow lesser. So that would be one reason, I believe, why fewer men seek help. And one of the things that we can do is we can promote that men are fully human in every possible way that a woman is, and that it's okay. But we have to present it to men in such a way as, for example, going to the doctor just keeps you stronger, as opposed to going to the doctor shows you're weak.
You know, the more I spend time looking through both, both sides of this argument, right, feminists and MRAs, and all the groups within that, because it's not one large monogamous group on each side. Groups are made inherently by individuals, and individuals have their own ideas on topics, right? But the more I go through it, the more I realize how when it comes to large social situations and social issues, men and women tend to react in very similar ways. That's one of the big things I've taken from reading and just reading through multiple issues about this.
Would you give me examples?
Well, right. Specifically, like when I look through these issues, like I see like you mentioned. Okay, wait. Let me gather my thoughts here. Like, what was the last thing you just mentioned?
We were talking about a man's sense of self. Yeah.
You cut off there, though.
He said a man's sense of self.
Right. Okay, yeah, a man's sense of self, right? So like in society, men are brought up to trying to seem strong, or you should be strong in order to be value yourself more, and I guess women have a equivalent to that in terms of appearance, right?
Yes.
Right. So when these issues start up, you have a specific individual. They grow up. They have their own issues, and so you have a large group of, say, women. They're brought up with similar issues in society, and of course, they start up a movement of feminism, try and maybe fix the issues they might see with certain with the same issues that they were brought up with, and the same thing you get with men, where of course it shouldn't. They notice a division in society, and that there's no logical meaning behind why a man should seem stronger in order to have value in society. And so movements start up in such a manner, right? But of course, these movements have been around for much longer than just the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, they evolve into a point where, after a few years, okay, the topic changes and so on and so forth. But I consider that to be something of an inherent selfishness in people, that it's hard to empathize with the other side.
Yes.
So and I see that on both sides, really.
Yes.
Of course, because of the way media has evolved, feminism is a much larger, stronger movement than the MRA movement is. So that's why, for now, we see the errors in that movement much more than what we see in the MRA movement. But yeah, go ahead.
I agree with you that it's hard to identify with the other side, but I do see that due to how men and women are basically bonded in relationships, that there are going to be instances where there's a common like a common good or common ground in the middle where a man might essentially see it as a no-brainer to advocate that his sister or wife have equal pay, because that it's going to benefit more than only her. It's going to benefit his family.
Right. Regarding the
same
wage
way that with and like on the flip side with something like child custody, there could be a case where a woman's brother has a child with a crazy lady basically, and wants her brother to get full custody, and I'm gonna basically side with him on that issue. So I think there are times where both sides are going to have the same aligning priorities, and it's going to come down to issues of fairness.
Do you know
Right,
what's funny about the child custody issue, though? Not too long ago, men were getting custody more often because they were the ones that had jobs, they were the ones that had financial stability, they were the ones that rewarded children. When
culture
things
changes
like,
quite quickly.
when they managed to change how the law decided on these things, and women would be able to get money through things like child benefits and obviously child payments from the father, they were able to win custody battles more often than not because the criterion changed, and it's forever in their favour 90% of the time. There are starting to become cases where the women out-earn the men that they're divorcing, and therefore with the same sort of
I think
things they
the
can get the
point
child.
is that as a society, the custody question really boils down to who is better suited, to basically, have responsibility for that child. Francis was using the word impartiality, in terms of the legal system.
Yes.
And I see this as I see this as an issue where both sides ought to basically really want impartiality because of how it affects children. I mean, it's not about us, or It shouldn't be about one side against or the other. It should be about the best result for the children in question.
One would
Yeah.
think so, but that's not the case. What we're talking about, essentially the argument of the best interest of the child started over in the days of couverture. Couverture in French means to cover. There was a time, and I don't know if it's applied to the States, but in England, the way that this came about was that there was a woman who was divorced by the husband, and she'd lost everything, and she raised a fuss. She wanted to be able to see her children. She caused the laws to be changed. Then it became known as then it became in the best interest of the child. Unfortunately, the way that the best interest of the child has been interpreted for the longest time is, well, let's see, the mother must breastfeed, the mother must nurture. Therefore, where at one time the best interest of the child was the one with the greatest economic clout who could take care of it and raise the child, it got converted into the notion of, well, the woman is most essential because she's feminine, she's nurturing, she lactates, and she has these skills that a man does not have.
Oh, and we always hear that women are more caring than men as
Yes,
well.
so that's one of those stereotypes. Now, the way that it actually plays out in law, now, Frank was saying that both sides want impartiality. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily true. Far, far too often, each side wants to quote-unquote win. And there's a number of reasons why. It's because the one who has custody of the child is the one who receives money from the other. So you can see where feminists would go, oh, this is where women are getting victimized. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get involved in the legal system, and we're going to start creating guidelines for judges to base these to base their judgments on. There's the famous quotation, which I really should learn properly, but at some point a judge said, listen, the way that I decided is this, is when I see the calf following the cow because of the udders. I don't see the calf following the male. This is a clear example of why women should get children. What the judge wasn't thinking is that after a while that calf no longer needs to feed from the mother and can feed on its own. And the best interest of the child, we've learned that psychologically, that there is an age where the mother and the mother's physical attributes are imperative for the child. But for the full development of the child, their personality, their socialization, their sense of self, it is actually preferable that they be in the company of a man. So after, I think it's something like the age of 5 or 6 years old, if you want to develop a strong child, it's preferable that they be surrounded by a man. So there's a splitting point that the court does not take in case. And I know I'm rambling, but just one last thing I want to add is, in Canada, one of the things, I've been in touch with a lot of men's groups, fathers groups lately, and I'm trying to really dig into that to get as expert as I can be. One of the tricks that happens very often is they'll say, okay, well, both parents have custody, but there's a difference between custody and primary residence. Primary residency is usually granted to women. Custody just means that you have the authority and obligations of guardianship, which means for a father that if you have quote-unquote custody, it doesn't mean that you have access to the child or that the child lives with you. It does mean that you can go bother teachers about why Billy's grades aren't so good, or you can get medical records, that you can fill in documents on the behalf of your child. So custody is not necessarily the same thing as residency and access.
Hey, Francis, I have to take off. I got to get up early tomorrow. But thanks again for coming on the show, and hope you guys, keep on having fun here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, you have a good night, Saka.
See you later, X. See you guys later.
That's what I was kind of messaging. I was making sure, like, I need to give mods to someone so that the room can stay up. But my wife's headed to bed. We've got a lot of crap going on today.
You know what? It's
I'll
getting
be up
close to
for
that
a
time for me
bit.
too.
Say that again.
It's getting close to that time for me too.
Oh, right on. Yeah, yeah, no, I don't mind leaving it open as long as y'all want to. I don't have to. Even usually when I duck out, I usually just leave it running, just pass mods to someone if they want to leave it going.
So do
I
you know
kind
what?
of actually before she actually gets laid down and settled in, I'd like to go on what you were just saying, because like I've been through. It wasn't. We weren't married. It was just my fiance. We have a a child. But then before that, I also had a long-term girlfriend that I had a son with, and the second one, right? I had almost primary custody without the legal system getting involved up until she was almost 3, and when or no, almost up until she was 5, because it was around when she started school that we wanted her. We both decided that she would go to school around where her mom lived, which I had moved in the meanwhile of it about an hour and a half away. So she went and stayed with her mom, and she kind of stays there now. I get her on school breaks and stuff. We've worked out a actually good thing. And at some point, that something she filed, and I'm on disability, made the court system get involved of child support, which was fine anyway. It was coming out of my disability anyway already. It just needed something she was forced into doing through the system. But with my son, he was able to be kept from me for 9 years almost through that. I really had no recourse because we weren't married, and in the state of Oklahoma, if you're not married and the mother, there's no legal precedent to put the father on the birth certificate.
Right.
And so I had, without that, there was no little to nothing I could do at the time, and I'm 17 at the time too. So I learned the reality of the one-sidedness of it around then.
Right.
Luckily, that one worked out too. Just for anybody listening, like at least with my son, when he turned about 13, he found a picture of me in a book somewhere along the lines. And I guess this whole time, my mom, kind of behind my back, was going and seeing him and kept a relationship open with him. She just wouldn't cross any lines that his mom didn't want her to. So he didn't know really who she was at the time, really like who she ultimately was. Anyway, he found a picture of me, and his mom came clean and said she was, why I wasn't there and that she had kept him away from me. And so now we have a great relationship. He's 18 now. So.
No, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, that issue is known as parental alienation.
Yep.
And I'm glad to know that it worked out for you.
Right on. Yep, I am too.
And you know what? On that note, for me, I think I'll close. Thank you, everyone, for the lovely evening, for the great chat. It really was fun. And at first, I had a great fear that these talks were going to be very much like YouTube comments where we have pigeons racing all over the chessboard. It is such a pleasure to know that when we speak one-on-one, that people can relate and have good conversations around this. So thank you again for modding, and thank you for everybody joining the conversation, and I wish you all a good evening.
Yep,
Hey,
yeah,
Francis,
glad you came.
It was great.
You.
It was great. It was great to have you there, Francis, as someone who's been heavily involved in it. I couldn't articulate my thoughts as well as I wanted to before because for some reason everything got jumbled up at the moment. But I did want to say in the main show and Deeper Dogma, it was first of all it was great that Xbox and Soccer were able to maintain the show in such a high level manner, right? And it was great to hear your thoughts as someone who's been heavily involved in both the men's rights movement and just the topics in general. So thank you.
Both. Yeah, I'm gonna kick it off air. Anybody on the audience that still wants to come in, there'll still be a couple people here, and the room could keep going. But I'm gonna kick off the live feed. Thanks again, Francis. Thanks, Carbon, for coming. Thanks, Chaz, for jumping in here at the after show.
Yeah, good.